I always pretend I'm a judge, Lindsay, you know.
If I ask him to.
Tell me when you're ready. Probably something I should. Okay. Motion to go into executive session.
So moved.
So moved. Thank you. Second. Thank you, Senator Shanley. We're going to start with 308. Do I have a motion?
I'll move in expedient to legislate.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay. Discussion.
Well, I think, once again, it's been an issue that I've worked on for many, many years. All of you saw the chart that I distributed during the hearing. I do think that at the very least, whether people are being paid at a minimum level or not, because I think there are very few in this day and age that are actually paid that amount, it sends a very poor message that the state of New Hampshire is the only state in all of New England that doesn't value workers enough to set what is at least a bare minimum wage that has to be paid. In a time when we are competing particularly for younger workers, I think it is due time that we settle on a number and that we have our own minimum wage instead of allowing the federal government to make these decisions for us. So for those reasons, I would oppose this motion.
Thank you. Go ahead, Senator Shanley. See you going for the button.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And I would agree with my colleague that it is time for New Hampshire to raise its minimum wage. We, as Senator Susie said, very few people may be making this amount, but those are the very same people that we should be raising the minimum wage for. Those people who are making minimum wage deserve to be making something closer to a living wage. And for that reason, I too will oppose the motion.
I want to go first, so I'll be really brief. The market is working. The real minimum wage is probably $13 to $14. I can't find anyone from Dunkin' Donuts. I'm working my way down in my towns near me. All the gas stations, all the supermarkets are paying in double figures. And I'd have to say, I feel the market forces are working. There's really no one that we can find out there, or almost no one, making the $7.25. So for that reason, I'm going to support the ITL. Go ahead, Senator Ennis.
I don't have too much to add other than the free market works, and the free market is working in this case. And wages have gone up pretty significantly, particularly at the lower end of the wage scale since COVID. It's gone up much faster at that level than it has at higher levels. And, if the federal government believes that the minimum wage should be raised, I would encourage them to do so. The state will follow that. But for whatever reason, that hasn't been a discussion at the federal level. My guess is it's not a discussion because the free market is indeed working. And I'd further add that, setting a blanket wage across a state, even one as small as ours, can be problematic. Certain employers and living conditions and cost of living, say in the North Country versus Nashua, Salem, very different. And I'm not sure the same level of wages would match up that well. So for that reason, I think there's no need to push this forward at this time.
Thank you, Senator Ennis. Senator Ricciardi.
I just wanted to say I do appreciate always all the dialogue and the sentiments from all of my colleagues. But again, no one is getting minimum wage. I was at the mall and Orange Julius was looking for someone for $19 an hour. So right now it's why are we trying to fix something that's not broken? I also talked to so many businesses who are the employers, and they explained how detrimental this would be. So for those reasons, I support the ITL. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor of the motion to ITL?
Aye.
And opposed?
Opposed?
Thank you. Senator Ennis, you want to take this out?
Yep.
Very good. Didn't get my consent. That was a joke. I'd like to take 366 next. Do I have any motion? Second? Discussion?
Let me open by saying there have been some concerns.
Thank you. Let me open by saying there have been a couple of concerns raised by the Farm Bureau and others around seeds of all things. And there are only 5 major seed companies in the world, which is in itself problematic. But one of those has a significant Chinese ownership stake, and there's concern that this would constrain their ability to test their seed products in the climate for which they're being designed. And I appreciate that concern. At the same time, I don't think that this is the right time or place to include any language around that. The bill is pretty clean as it is, and I'm sure this is something we can work through.
Thanks, Senator Ennis. Senator Susie, is your button pushed or?
Yeah, just a couple of things. The issue that I had raised, and we had talked about the fact that, as Senator Ennis said, there was a concern raised by the Farm Bureau, but the concern that I had raised was just the enforcement of,
Senator Susie, I'm sorry. I should have mentioned that. I did hear from the Attorney General's office very recently. And they said themselves or the county attorney could bring forth such an action.
but once again, it's not who can bring the action, it's who's going to be monitoring
Okay.
the actual acquisition. Is somebody going to be monitoring the registry? I mean, look,
I get you.
I think everybody agrees that we don't want the, Chinese ownership around some of our bases because of some of the threats that have been posed. I mean, that seems obvious, but I don't know. Maybe this is something that's already being monitored by the federal government. I don't have the answer to it, but.
Okay. Yes, Senator Shanley.
Yeah, I really would, I had hoped that we might be able to amend this bill to make it more workable. Or, if the bill as we have it in front of us, I think deserves study, I do think it is, we could amend it to find something workable. I'm a little bit concerned that it focuses on one entity when we know, in fact, that there are numerous bad actors out there who could pose a threat to the United States military installations. So that is one of my concerns, as well as enforcement issues, and as well as the issues Senator Ennis raised. I really wish that we could put the brakes on this and come to an agreement, because I think we can reach agreement on this. I'm just not sure this bill as written is agreeable.
Okay, all in favor of the motion, which is ought to pass prevailing, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Nay, right? Or not?
I mean, I agree, it should have, I do think it could be better, but.
I will not oppose this at this time, but I may bring a floor amendment.
Okay. So you're both on the ought to pass vote. Ought to pass. Okay, thank you.
Likely not consent is what I'm
Right,
hearing.
Correct.
Yeah, we won't put it on consent.
Okay.
Senator Ennis, you want to do this one too?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, great. We're gonna go next to 517. And do I have an ought to pass motion?
So moved.
Second. So I'll just talk about it first, then we can move on. So this was relative to the employment status of university students working in educational programs. I do have an amendment on this also. First, I'll just quickly re-sum what I've said before. 40 years ago, believe it or not, at Dominic Hall, I was an RA. My son's been an RA at Connecticut College. One of my daughters is going to be an RA next semester at Trinity College. So it has been a great thing for the Gannon family to go to better institutions and not pay as much, and also not pay taxes, because those are not taxable wages, which would change if this was considered an employment situation. It's been a century-old tradition at colleges. I felt I was never really, I had several jobs at St. A's. One, I was an RA, and I didn't really consider that the same as when I'd go down to the cafeteria and do work there where I punched in and punched out. And I understood that more as a job where I see my time in the dorm. I guess I was sort of always on call, but I was, not there a lot. I did sports. I was on my Friday and Saturday nights, which I may or may not do anything. I guess if something happened, you could be always on call. But it was more of a familia type relationship with the school, with the other students. I liked it wasn't taxed income. That was great. So I looked at it as an exception to employment. I really don't see it as an employment thing. It gave me traditional opportunities. I developed leadership skills. I feel my son, who's now finishing his master's at Penn, really got there partially because he did his RA thing. Now he'll be going on to a doctorate. So I see it's facilitated growth in a leadership role at a dorm without really being an employment situation. That's about it. I guess I see it more when you're being an RA. You're earning and learning tax-free. So I don't want to disturb an age-old tradition. And that's where I feel about it. Other thoughts?
Could I ask Senator Gant the amendment that you're referring to?
Sure.
0645.
Is that the newest one, or did I have a newer one? Okay, that would be the newest one
So
then.
this is the one we discussed last time. You
Yes.
haven't done it for-
No. Correct, there was no further 0645, yep. Just making sure. I'm aware of your thoughts, but go ahead.
So I still go back to the concern that this arose as a result of an issue with timekeeping, my understanding is at Plymouth State. And, this came in as a bill far, far different than what's proposed in the amendment. And that gave me very, very grave concerns with extracurriculars. But one of the things that still concerns me, we do have a letter from a student at Dartmouth College who talks about their responsibilities. And one of them is regarding safety. And I wonder if, I know there's someone here from the department, this bill would exempt students from workers' compensation. And I wonder if students currently are able to avail themselves of workers' compensation if they're injured. And also, more generally, if the department had reviewed this amendment and had offered any suggestions. If that's possible, I would appreciate it.
Good morning. If you can just identify yourselves for the record, that'd be great. Thank you.
So good morning, I'm Danielle Albert. I am the Deputy Commissioner for the New Hampshire Department of Labor. I'm here with John Garrigan, who is General Counsel for the New Hampshire Department of Labor. And we are happy to answer any questions that have come up addressing Senator Soucy's question, and correct me if I have it wrong, it was almost like a two-part question. Number one, as I understood it, what happens currently under current iteration of statute when you have somebody in an RA scenario, and then generally what happens with students when injuries occur on a campus. So I'm going to work in the reverse. When we look at just a student population, students by and large are not going to be in an employment relationship with a university because you're there, you're paying to be there, you're being educated as a result of the tuition that you're paying. So in general, if I'm just a student or if a person is just a student and they get hurt at a university, that would be something other than workers' compensation. You're not going to bring yourself within the realm of 281A in the workers' compensation law in the absence of an employee-employer relationship. For RAs, it is a little bit different because there's this additional portion. The department has reviewed the amendment, so we are familiar with the language, and we don't have concerns with the language. With RAs, if an RA under current iteration of the statute were to get hurt at work, they would have the ability to pursue a workers' compensation claim should they elect to do so, if that's what they want to do. And the question at that point would be whether or not they fall within that employee-employer relationship, and a presumption would attach. So when we look at the language of the workers' compensation statute, with the exception of specifically enumerated types of employment, by and large, everybody is presumed to be an employee. So what that means in the context of a dispute is if one arises, the employer must come forward and then demonstrate that the individual is something other than an employee. They either have to meet the 7 criteria to establish that they're independent contractor, or will have to establish that there is not a contract for hire that's either voluntary, written, or implied. So it would be somewhat fact dependent, I believe. I will say I'm not aware of any disputed claims involving university students who are in RA or dorm counselor roles coming to the department's attention within the past 4 or 5 years.
So if I could just follow
Yes,
up,
follow.
but it's clear that if we were to adopt this amendment, they would not be able to even pursue a claim should they be injured, even though they're, I mean, I'm reading this to say that 281A2 in the section that it would not apply.
I think to clarify it just a little bit, I think you'd actually have to read provision, I don't have the entire statute in front of me, so forgive me, above.
Okay.
So what the amendment to the workers' compensation statute is doing, it is removing residential assistance in these dorm counselors
From
from
the
benefiting
presumption?
from the presumption.
From the
But that does
presumption,
not
okay.
in and of itself mean that they are barred or precluded from pursuing a claim. The presumption will not attach. And so again, you'd be subject to that burden shift, and there would have to be a demonstration from the university if they're asserting this is not an employee-employer relationship to put that forward.
So there would then be, if I may follow up, so then there would be more onus on the individual student to prove without the presumption.
Yes,
It
because
would-
the presumption
burden
would
of
not be
proof
there.
would then,
Correct.
so in the instance where students are in charge of safety and they try to break up a fight and they're injured, they're potentially on the hook for their own injuries without any coverage, even if they pursue it.
Dependent on
By
how
the
that
language
dispute.
of this statute, it's likely that they may be, even if permanently impaired.
Yes,
As a
dependent
result of
upon,
it, they're not going to have any protections.
dependent upon how
On
it
the-
played out,
right,
yes.
Right,
yes.
understood.
And again, my understanding is there could be other programs out there, health insurance or other forms of benefit that may be available if it is something that doesn't rise to the level of workers' compensation.
But today the burden is on the university or college, and this will shift it to the individual.
Yeah, currently, I think the burden would, the presumption would attach and it would apply. And the amendment would change that.
Senator Shaddy has a question.
So, thank you for taking my question. So how has it been in the past? You know, this is just an age-old tradition where I look at it as a barter system. I've talked to young people who are RAs, and their whole focus was, I can't afford college if I don't have my room and board. And that's really been their primary focus. And I would assume if there was some sort of a dispute, breaking up a fight, if they were injured by that person, they would have some sort of legal recourse to the attacker. Would that not be true?
I believe that would be true, and taking it outside the scope of simply RAs, nothing prevents anybody who is an injured worker from pursuing, let's say, an attacker. What the workers' compensation statute will do is it prevents you from pursuing a negligence claim or other tortious claim against your employer because you're within the realm of workers' compensation. But in a scenario where you have a third-party tortfeasor, nothing would prevent any injured worker from pursuing such a third-party claim. If it is also a compensable workers' compensation claim, the insurance carrier, the workers' comp insurance carrier, has the ability to statutorily attach or has a statutory lien on any proceeds that may come through a third-party lawsuit. So slightly, probably more in-depth than asked, but no, nothing would stop even a more traditional injured worker from pursuing an attacker. But under the workers' comp statute, if it's within the realm of workers' compensation, you can't sue the employer.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Seeing none? Thank you both, unless you had
You're
something.
very
on the
welcome.
thoughts.
I did have.
Oh, I'm sorry, go
I'm
ahead.
sorry,
Sen.
just one last thing. I just want to make sure I understood your position. The department has reviewed the amendment and can work with the amendment, but it doesn't take a position as to the policy. Is that correct?
No, we do not take a position as to the policy, but as far as the amended language, we do understand it. And as I had expressed at the public hearing, we understand that there's a need and we don't have any concerns about carrying out enforcement of it as written. You're
Thank
welcome.
you both.
Thank you.
Is there someone from the UNH system here? Would you, I think we might have a couple questions for you, or you could follow up on Senator Rishardi's question from me. So I guess my question to you is, your position at the
Sam,
university.
my name is, first of all, my name is Chad Pimentel. I'm the general counsel of the university system. Sorry. I'm sorry, Senator Gain, my position on.
On the amended bill.
Sure. So what we tried to do was address the comments we received from the agencies about the implementability of the bill as originally presented by taking out some of the language that folks thought was ambiguous around other extracurricular activities, and also maintaining a uniform definition of employment throughout all of 281A, which was the preference of the agency. They could work with it either way, but it was the preference. So that's what we've brought forward. And we think that that addresses the wage and hour concerns that we identified in our testimony earlier.
Any questions? No. Senator Shanley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you. We've had the public hearing. We've discussed it. We've heard from the Senator Gannon regarding the amendment, but I'm still. My question for you really has to do with. I still do not see the distinction. Are you saying that an RA is performing the duties on behalf of the university, which are somehow, how are you distinguishing? If an RA is performing duties on behalf of the university or college, and someone who works at the bookstore or in the food service or on the grounds is also performing duties on behalf of the university, how do you make that distinction?
We think it's a combination of the nature of the duties that are involved and
Combination of the nature.
the nature of the duties that are involved and the relationship that the student has with the university in that role. Because you're right, it's the nature of a relationship between the student and the university is complicated, and you can be wearing multiple hats. For grad students, we're teaching them and we're employing them and we're housing them, and there's a lot of different sort of things that go into it. For RAs, we view our residential programs as an extension of our educational program. The reason we have students come to campuses is so they can live and learn with each other. RAs help facilitate that program and themselves gain skills and as part of their own education by doing it. So we think both in that it's more akin to an extension of the classroom than it is going to the bookstore, punching in, doing a specific task for a specific set of hours. The other part is the relationship that we think the program works best is if the RA and the student view themselves as peers, and the institution is able to relate to the RA as a student and not an employee. That ideally fosters a sense of community that we're going for in our residential programs, as opposed to it being we are putting an employee of the university in your dorm room to keep an eye on you. And we feel like the program doesn't work as well with that structural mindset.
Thank you.
Senator Shardy.
Good morning. So in hearing what you're saying, it is just part of their educational experience. It's an extension of the classroom. So if they were to get injured, it would just be like any other student who's at school and gets injured for some reason. Would that be fair to say yes?
So in general, our students have medical insurance. They come along. So if the student was injured, there would be a recourse for that. Well, I would never, my position is hard for me to advocate saying you could sue the university. You could, of course, sue the university as well if there was negligence on the university's part. If they were injured by a third person, they could go after the third person. So we do think that there's recourse for students who are injured. The other part of it is, the majority of their compensation in this position. In fact, oftentimes all of their compensation comes in the form of room and board. If an RA was injured, no longer able to perform their duties as RA, we would not throw them out of the dorm. We would not turn off their cafeteria card. They would continue to receive the compensation that they were going to have gotten so long as they were continuing along in their university course.
Sounds like it's been working for a very long time the way it is.
Similarly to what the deputy director said from the Department of Labor, I'm not aware of any issues that have come up regarding injured RAs at our institutions in the recent past.
Thank you.
Cinder, Susie.
So when an RA is selected, assume you have a selection process, you have a certain number of RAs. What information is the individual given? Are they provided with an offer letter? Are they required to work or be available certain hours? Are they assigned certain tasks such as safety or counseling or?
They are required to be on call for certain hours. There is certain programming that they're required to put on in the dorms. Yes, I honestly don't know documentation wise in terms of an offer letter. I'm not certain what's involved.
If I may follow up, if this bill to pass, would you now inform students that they are not employees and that they would not be afforded the same areas of protection, such as workers' compensation or anything else, or would you?
I do think that we would probably say, yes, this is not intended to create an employment relationship because we believe that's not the proper relationship. I don't know that we have dug down to the level of workers' comp or that sort of thing, even under current practice. It's a good question and something we would have to think about.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Cinder. And did you have a question?
Yes.
No.
It was answered.
Okay, thank you very
Thank
much for your testimony. Appreciate it. Okay, we have an ought to pass motion. All in favor? Aye. I'm sorry. Oh, no, I did not do the amendment. Yes. I want to offer the bill first.
Very good. Ought to pass.
Ought to pass. Yeah. So I need to pass the bill first, correct?
Yeah.
No, the amendment. I'm doing it backwards.
The amendment.
Yeah. I'm sorry. Thank you for indulging me.
I will move on to pass on the amendment to the bill.
I will second that.
Thank you. All in favor? Aye. On the amendment. Done? No. Okay, 3-2. As amended. Yeah, go ahead.
So I really just want to say, and I fear that I might be repeating myself, but it bears repeating, is that, from my perspective and everything I've heard in testimony, that RAs are performing necessary duties for the university and they're being compensated for it. That to me seems to be, they have been considered employees and they are doing what other students who work for the university do. They are being compensated for work performed. Now, are they learning on that job? Yes, they absolutely are learning on that job. So are the students who are working in other capacities for the university learning from those jobs. And I think to argue that because there is a learning aspect of the job, what job does not have some aspect of learning is not persuasive to me that we need to change the law at this point.
Thank you, Senator. Okay, go ahead.
I would just add to that once again, I do not think that students, and that's why I asked the question about notice. I think this is a significant shift in what students believe they are doing. I think students believe they are working because they are receiving compensation, therefore they're employees, and many other protections attached to employees that now would no longer. And for those reasons, I think this is going to be potential significant shift in how many students choose to accept these positions, knowing the risk of doing so.
Senator Ennis?
Well, I appreciate Senator Susie's comments. I'm not sure that that will be the case. This sort of arrangement has been in place for decades. It works well, not just in New Hampshire, but across the country. It's a unique arrangement because the students are immersed in what they're doing. Tracking hours, treating it as a traditional employment situation, it just doesn't fit. It's a round peg in a square hole. And, we have a situation here where something isn't broken, and we're trying to enable it to continue as it's been operating, which has been beneficial to the universities, to the students living in the dorms, and to those students who are serving as RAs. I think it's a good bill, and we ought to pass it.
Thank you, Senator. Seeing no other discussion, I'll make a motion ought to pass as amended.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? No. Okay, I'll take it out. Thank you.
All right.
And so, moving on. To 518, Senator Susie, do you know where that's at relative to the eviction? Based on the owner's intent to renovate? I'm sorry. I thought he was, but okay. And then I was blaming Senator Shanley. I apologize. Somehow I thought she was taking care of that, but. And then
I apologize.
we'll find out. So we have that one to go, and we have 436, which I haven't seen. We haven't seen a Perkins Book amendment. So we'll work on that in 2 weeks.
And I know that has been
She's aware.
ongoing.
I know she's busy. Yep. Lots going on. So those two we'll bring up, and we'll probably schedule one bill first, and then we'll go into exec second. Is that all we have left? Is that one right to work? Okay. What's the other one?
I understand. You don't even have to say it.
Okay.
That's
Okay. So maybe we'll do, and then do right to work and then exec after, or you think the right to work's gonna take forever because of next door's experience? Okay. Sure. Okay. Motion to come out of executive session? No, it wouldn't be next week. We're thinking of doing it the week after. We're thinking of doing nothing next week.
Yes.
Okay. Second. Thank you. All in favor of coming out of executive session? Aye. Aye. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Are we done? We're adjourned. All right. It's Three Musketeers if anyone wants one. Go right to my hips.
Yeah, right.
I work out.